Lada, a high-end, bustling restaurant in the heart of the city. The rich aroma of gourmet dishes filled the air. Waiters and waitresses dashed from table to table, tending to the elite clientele who frequented the establishment. Among the servers was Ryan, a young waiter with a sharp appearance and an even sharper attitude. His goal was to impress the wealthiest of patrons, ensuring the highest tips for himself. One evening, as the dinner rush began, an elderly man shuffled into the restaurant. He was dressed in simple, worn clothes, his posture slightly hunched, and his shoes scuffed from years of wear. He didn't fit the image of the upscale diners that usually graced the establishment. He looked out of place, like a man who had wandered into the wrong place. Ryan, noticing the elderly man, sneered internally. The man had quietly taken a seat at a corner table, far from the gleaming chandeliers and lavish decor. Without a second thought, Ryan decided to ignore him. He probably can't afford anything here, Ryan thought dismissively, focusing instead on serving his wealthier customers, hoping for substantial tips. Minutes passed, and the elderly man remained patient, looking at the menu with soft, almost nostalgic eyes. Finally, after being ignored for quite some time, he raised his hand gently to catch Ryan's attention. With a forced smile, Ryan approached the man. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone dripping with condescension. "Yes, please," the elderly man said, his voice soft but warm. "I'd like to order the chef's special for tonight." Ryan raised an eyebrow, glancing quickly at the old man's worn clothing. "The chef's special is quite expensive," he said, unable to hide his skepticism. "Are you sure that's what you want?" The man nodded kindly. "Yes, that would be wonderful, and perhaps a glass of your finest wine to go with it." Ryan couldn't suppress a laugh. The idea of this old man, who clearly didn't belong in such an establishment, ordering the most expensive dish and wine was laughable to him. "All right," he replied, his voice laced with sarcasm. "But just so you know, we don't accept loose change as payment." The elderly man simply smiled. "Thank you for your concern. I assure you, I'll be able to cover the cost." Ryan scoffed, shaking his head as he walked away. Throughout the evening, he continued to make snide remarks to the other staff about the elderly man, mocking his appearance and assuming he would soon be embarrassed when the bill came. Finally, the meal was served, and the elderly man savored every bite. He ate slowly, enjoying the flavors, while Ryan continued to shoot him glances, waiting for the inevitable moment when the man would ask for the bill and realize he couldn't pay. As the night wound down, the elderly man calmly requested the check. With a smirk, Ryan brought it to him, eagerly awaiting the moment of humiliation. The old man carefully pulled out a sleek, leather wallet. Ryan's smirk faded as he watched the man pull out a black, diamond-encrusted credit card, a card reserved only for the wealthiest and most elite individuals in the world. The elderly man handed it over with a quiet grace. Ryan's heart sank. He quickly swiped the card, his mind racing as he realized his mistake. Who was this man? Moments later, the restaurant's manager appeared, his face pale as he recognized the elderly patron. The manager rushed over to the table, bowing slightly. "Mr. Langston, it's such an honor to have you here tonight. Please, allow me to cover the bill as a token of our gratitude for your business." Ryan's eyes widened in horror. Mr. Langston? The name echoed in his mind. He had heard of Henry Langston, one of the wealthiest and most influential businessmen in the country. The elderly man before him wasn't just anyone. He was the owner of multiple luxury hotels, high-end restaurants, and real estate empires. Ryan had been humiliating a man who could buy the entire restaurant without batting an eye. Henry Langston, however, remained humble. He politely declined the manager's offer. "That won't be necessary. I appreciate the gesture, but I always pay for what I receive." The manager nodded nervously and scurried away, casting Ryan a furious glance. Ryan, still in shock, approached the table, his face flushed with embarrassment. I'm so sorry, Mr. Langston," he stammered, suddenly deferential. "I didn't realize who you were." Mr. Langston looked at Ryan with a calm, measured gaze. "It's not important who I am," he said softly. "What matters is how you treat people, regardless of their appearance. Every person deserves respect, whether they wear a suit or tattered clothes. You should never judge someone by their exterior." Ryan's shame deepened, and he nodded, struggling to find the right words. Mr. Langston stood up, leaving a generous tip on the table, far more than Ryan had ever received. "Perhaps," Mr. Langston said as he turned to leave, "this will be a lesson for you. Remember, kindness and respect cost nothing, but they can mean everything." As the elderly man walked out of the restaurant, the entire staff watched in silence. Ryan stood frozen in place, the weight of his actions finally sinking in. He had let arrogance blind him, and it had cost him a valuable lesson. The old man had left not only a financial tip, but a far more important lesson in humility and humanity. From that day forward, Ryan's attitude toward customers changed. He no longer judged people based on appearances, understanding now that respect and kindness were the true marks of a good person. After Mr. Langston left the restaurant, Ryan remained rooted to the spot, his mind swirling with a mix of shame and regret. The weight of his actions pressed down on him as he replayed the events in his head. The sneers, the dismissive remarks. All of it felt ugly now, like a stain he couldn't wash away. For the first time in his life, Ryan truly understood what it meant to be humbled. The next day, he entered the restaurant feeling different. He no longer looked at the customers as walking dollar signs, and his usually cocky swagger was replaced with quiet reflection. He caught the eyes of the manager, who gave him a sharp, knowing look, a reminder that his actions the previous night hadn't gone unnoticed. Ryan was determined to make things right, but how? He had humiliated one of the most respected men in the country, and no apology seemed enough. Later that evening, Ryan asked the manager if they had any way to contact Mr. Langston. The manager looked at him skeptically, but eventually handed over a business card with Mr. Langston's secretary's contact information. Ryan knew he needed to speak to the man in person to offer a sincere apology, not just for his career, but for himself. A week passed before Ryan mustered the courage to reach out to Mr. Langston's office. To his surprise, he was granted a meeting at one of Mr. Langston's many hotels. Dressed in his best suit, Ryan felt an overwhelming sense of dread as he entered the luxurious lobby. Everything around him screamed wealth and success, a world far removed from his own reality. When he was finally escorted to Mr. Langston's office, Ryan's palms were sweaty and his heart pounded in his chest. The receptionist led him through the expansive office, and there, behind a grand desk, sat Henry Langston. The elderly man looked as serene and humble as he had in the restaurant, but there was an air of quiet authority about him. Ryan stood awkwardly at the door, unsure of how to start. Mr. Langston motioned for him to sit down. "Good to see you again, Ryan," Mr. Langston said, his voice gentle but steady. "What brings you here?" Ryan swallowed hard. "Mr. Langston, I'm here to apologize for how I treated you. I was rude, arrogant, and I judged you without knowing anything about you. I let my assumptions cloud my judgment, and I feel terrible for how I acted." Mr. Langston listened patiently, his expression unreadable. After a moment, he leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving Ryan's. "You're young," Mr. Langston began. "It's easy to make mistakes when we're focused on ourselves and what we think we know. But the real question is, what have you learned from it?" Ryan nodded eagerly. "I've learned that appearances don't define a person, and that respect should be given to everyone, no matter who they are or what they look like. I understand now how hurtful it is to make assumptions. I can't take back what I said, but I want you to know I'm truly sorry, and I've changed how I treat people." There was a long pause as Mr. Langston regarded Ryan carefully. Then, to Ryan's surprise, Mr. Langston smiled warmly. "Apology accepted, Ryan. The fact that you came here today shows you've learned something important. It's not the mistakes we make that define us, but how we choose to correct them." Ryan felt an immense weight lift from his shoulders, gratitude flooding him. He hadn't expected such kindness from the man he had wronged. As Ryan prepared to leave the meeting, Mr. Langston stopped him with a question that caught him off guard. "What are your goals, Ryan? Do you want to keep working as a waiter, or is there something more you're hoping for?" Ryan hesitated, unsure how to answer. He had always seen waiting tables as a temporary job while he figured out his next steps, but now, standing in front of one of the most powerful businessmen in the country, the question felt loaded with potential. "I've never really thought about it seriously," Ryan admitted. "I suppose I've been drifting, just trying to get by." Mr. Langston nodded thoughtfully. "I see potential in you. You have the capacity to grow, to learn from your mistakes, and to do something meaningful. I'm offering you an opportunity. If you're willing to work hard and prove that you've truly changed, I can give you a position in one of my hotels. You'll start small, but it will be a chance for you to learn and grow in a professional environment." Ryan was stunned. The last thing he had expected from this meeting was a job offer, let alone from the man he had insulted. His heart raced as he processed the opportunity. I don't know what to say," he stammered. "Thank you, Mr. Langston. I won't let you down." "You've already taken the first step by acknowledging your mistake," Mr. Langston said. "Now it's up to you to continue learning and growing. Remember, success isn't about how much money you make or who you impress. It's about how you treat people along the way." Ryan began his new job at one of Mr. Langston's luxury hotels the following week. He was assigned a modest role in guest services, responsible for ensuring that guests had a pleasant stay. It was a far cry from the fast-paced, tip-driven restaurant environment he was used to, but Ryan was determined to make the most of the opportunity. At first, the transition was difficult. Ryan had to learn how to handle high-end clientele with grace and professionalism. He had to check his ego at the door and focus on serving others with respect, regardless of how they treated him. There were days when guests were demanding, rude, and entitled, but Ryan reminded himself of the lesson Mr. Langston had taught him. Every person deserves respect, no matter their status or appearance. Slowly, Ryan began to excel in his role. His new mindset allowed him to connect with guests in a way that he hadn't before. He was no longer serving for the sake of tips or recognition. He was genuinely invested in making each guest's experience positive. Word of his dedication and attitude began to spread throughout the hotel, and it wasn't long before Ryan caught the attention of the hotel's management. They saw in him a willingness to learn and a strong work ethic, traits that set him apart from others. Months passed, and Ryan's growth did not go unnoticed by Mr. Langston. The elderly businessman invited Ryan to a meeting at one of his corporate offices, this time not as a reprimand, but as a mentor guiding a young professional. During the meeting, Mr. Langston introduced Ryan to some of the executives and board members of his company. "This young man has shown tremendous growth," Mr. Langston said, with pride evident in his voice. "He came to me not too long ago with a lesson in humility, and now he stands here as an example of how character, not just ambition, leads to true success." Ryan felt a mix of gratitude and disbelief. To think that just a short while ago, he had humiliated the very man who was now opening doors to his future. The executives were impressed by Ryan's story and his dedication, and some even offered him mentorships to further his career. Years passed, and Ryan rose through the ranks of Mr. Langston's company, eventually becoming a manager at one of the luxury hotels. His career had flourished, but more importantly, he had grown as a person. One day, while walking through the lobby, Ryan saw an elderly man sitting quietly in one of the chairs by the entrance. He was dressed simply, much like Mr. Langston had been when Ryan first met him. Without hesitation, Ryan approached the man with a warm smile and genuine respect. "Good afternoon, sir," Ryan said kindly. "Can I assist you with anything?" The elderly man smiled back. "Just waiting for someone, thank you." As Ryan walked away, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had come full circle, from the arrogant young waiter who judged others based on appearances to a man who understood the true value of kindness, respect, and humility. And he owed it all to the humble stranger who had changed his life. As Ryan settled into his new managerial role, he quickly realized that his success brought new challenges. Running a high-end hotel wasn't just about providing luxury service. It required navigating complex guest demands, handling difficult situations, and managing a diverse team of employees. Ryan found himself working long hours, and the pressure began to mount. One evening, as the hotel hosted a high-profile gala event, Ryan noticed a young waiter who reminded him of his old self, arrogant, impatient, and overly focused on tips. The waiter, Luke, had been snapping at the kitchen staff and rolling his eyes when guests made requests, clearly seeing the event as nothing more than a way to earn extra money. Ryan, remembering how Mr. Langston had guided him, decided to step in. After the gala ended, Ryan called Luke aside for a private conversation. "Look, I've been where you are," Ryan began, his tone calm but firm. "I used to think this job was just about getting by and making tips, but it's more than that. You're in a position to learn and grow, not just professionally, but as a person. The way you treat people matters, and it will come back to you in ways you can't even imagine." Luke, taken aback, stared at Ryan in silence for a moment before speaking. "I don't get it. You're successful now. Why does it matter how I act?" Ryan smiled. "Success isn't about where you end up, it's about how you get there. You'll find that treating people with respect and humility is the foundation for long-term success, not just in your career, but in life." Though Luke seemed skeptical, Ryan knew from experience that the young waiter would soon face his own lessons in humility. Several months passed, and Ryan's hotel continued to thrive under his leadership. One day, Ryan received word that Mr. Langston would be visiting for an important business meeting. Despite his many years of success, Ryan still felt a deep sense of gratitude and respect for the man who had given him a second chance. When Mr. Langston arrived, Ryan greeted him warmly, noting the elderly man's familiar, humble demeanor. As they sat down to discuss business, Ryan couldn't help but reflect on how far he had come since that fateful day in the restaurant. During their conversation, Mr. Langston smiled and said, "You've done well, Ryan. I always knew you had potential, but it's your character that impresses me the most." Ryan beamed, feeling a sense of pride. "I owe so much of it to you, Mr. Langston. You taught me a lesson I'll never forget, that respect and kindness are more valuable than anything." Mr. Langston leaned back in his chair, a glimmer of amusement in his eyes. "I'm glad you learned that lesson, Ryan. But remember, growth never stops. Every day is a new opportunity to learn, even for someone in your position." Ryan nodded, understanding that despite his achievements, there was always more to learn and new ways to improve. Mr. Langston's words echoed in his mind long after their meeting ended. Not long after Mr. Langston's visit, Ryan faced his greatest test yet. A wealthy and notoriously difficult guest, Mr. Pendleton, checked into the hotel. He was known for being rude, entitled, and almost impossible to please. Within hours of his arrival, Mr. Pendleton began making unreasonable demands, complaining about everything from the temperature of his room to the service of the staff. Ryan tried his best to accommodate the man's requests, but Mr. Pendleton's attitude grew worse with each interaction. The staff was beginning to lose patience, and the situation was quickly spiraling out of control. One afternoon, Ryan decided to confront Mr. Pendleton directly. He knocked on the door of the guest's luxurious suite, determined to resolve the issue. When Mr. Pendleton opened the door, his expression was one of disdain. "What do you want?" he snapped. Ryan remained calm, remembering the lessons he had learned from Mr. Langston. "Mr. Pendleton, I understand that you have certain expectations, and we're doing everything we can to meet them. But I'd like to ask for your patience and understanding. Our staff is working hard to make your stay enjoyable, and I'm here to personally ensure that your concerns are addressed." To Ryan's surprise, Mr. Pendleton's icy demeanor softened for a moment. He studied Ryan carefully before speaking. "Most people just try to brush me off or ignore my complaints. You're the first one to actually talk to me directly." Ryan seized the opportunity. "It's important to me that every guest feels valued. If there's anything specific you need, I'm happy to help, but I ask that we work together to make your stay as pleasant as possible." Mr. Pendleton nodded slowly, seemingly impressed by Ryan's professionalism. "Very well," he said. "I'll give it a chance." Over the next few days, Ryan personally ensured that Mr. Pendleton's stay improved. By the end of the week, the once difficult guest left the hotel with a sincere thank you. even leaving a positive review and a generous tip for the staff. Ryan had successfully turned a negative situation into a win by treating even the most challenging guest with respect and empathy. As Ryan continued to grow in his role, he kept a close eye on Luke, the young waiter he had once advised. Over time, Ryan noticed small changes in Luke's behavior. He was becoming more patient with guests and more respectful toward his colleagues. One evening, after a particularly busy dinner service, Luke approached Ryan. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," Luke admitted, "about treating people with respect. It's hard sometimes, especially when guests are rude, but I've been trying to change." Ryan smiled, recognizing the familiar journey of growth. "It's not always easy, but you're on the right track. The way you handle difficult situations will define your success more than anything else." Luke nodded, a new sense of determination in his eyes. "Thanks for giving me a chance, Ryan. I didn't think I needed to change at first, but I can see now that this job is about more than just making money. It's about how you carry yourself." Ryan felt a sense of pride. Luke's transformation reminded him of his own journey, and he was grateful to have passed on the lessons he had learned from Mr. Langston. Years later, Ryan had risen to the position of general manager at one of Mr. Langston's flagship hotels. His reputation for integrity and professionalism had earned him respect throughout the industry. One day, Mr. Langston called Ryan to his office for an important discussion. "I'm nearing retirement," Mr. Langston said, his voice steady but tinged with the weight of time. "And I've been thinking about the future of my business. I want someone who embodies the values I've worked hard to build, someone I can trust to carry on my legacy." Ryan's heart raced. He knew what Mr. Langston was implying, but he could hardly believe it. "You mean?" Mr. Langston smiled. "I want you to take over, Ryan. You've proven yourself time and again, not just as a leader, but as someone who understands the importance of kindness, respect, and humility. I can think of no one better suited to lead my company into the future." Ryan was overwhelmed with emotion. The man who had once been the object of his scorn was now offering him the opportunity of a lifetime. It was a full circle moment, a testament to the power of second chances and personal growth. With tears in his eyes, Ryan accepted the offer. "I'll do my best to honor your legacy, Mr. Langston." "I know you will," Mr. Langston said with a smile. "And remember, no matter how high you rise, never forget where you started. Treat everyone with the same respect, whether they're at the top or just starting out." As Ryan stepped into his new role as the head of Mr. Langston's company, he felt a profound sense of responsibility. He knew that the lessons he had learned, from humility to leadership, would guide him in the years to come. He made it his mission to foster a culture of respect and kindness within the company, ensuring that every employee, from the top executives to the newest hires, understood the importance of treating others with dignity. Under his leadership, the company thrived, not just financially, but as a place where people wanted to work and grow. Ryan never forgot the journey that had brought him to this point, the mistakes, the lessons, and the second chances. And as he looked out at the bustling city from his office, he knew that his success wasn't just a result of hard work, but of the kindness of a humble stranger who had changed his life forever. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the story. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more delightful stories.